Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me tonight for this webinar on Canadian university applications. My name is David Hawkins. It's my great pleasure to be with you for the third of my three spring webinars. If you haven't joined me for those on the United States or on Europe, please do get in touch via the details below and I can share those with you. The theme tonight is applying to universities in Canada, and hopefully over the next 30 to 45 minutes, I can share a range of information with you that you can either use yourself or with your students that will be beneficial for students considering university applications to Canada. If you would like to ask any questions or follow up, please do also contact me. The format of the webinars doesn't really allow for easy back and forth, so my contact details, as I say, are on the screen there. My name is David Hawkins, and I run a company called The University Guy, and our mission is to help students reduce their levels of stress when applying to a university outside of either their home country or their country of education. And it's my great pleasure to be a member of the Council of International Schools, of the Council of British International Schools, the International Association for College Admissions Counselling, and the US-based IECA. And so hopefully that gives some reassurance. The information I'm going to convey tonight comes from a position of some expertise. But the key thing to understand is that we are here to try and give some information to assist students. For those of you who want to know what I look like, there's a photo here. Okay, so first off, before I delve into the key processes involved in studying in Canada, is to think about why students might actually wish to study in Canada. It's a country of choice which has become really, really popular over the last few years, driven by some important and very committed outreach by the Canadian government to attract increasing numbers of international students to Canada. There are some really obvious reasons why students might want to study in Canada, and one which I actually haven't included here, which potentially drives a lot of it, but isn't necessarily immediately obvious to students. So the 6 reasons why I think students are increasingly attracted to Canada are these. It's a broader degree than is possible in the UK system, and being based here in the UK, I am typically working with students who are used to the single or joint honours focus of a UK university degree. But the Canada pathway offers them, over a slightly longer degree structure, the opportunity to delve into a number of other subjects that might link to the area of study that they're interested in. And so they don't necessarily, at the time of application, have to pick that one area they want to study with. We are in North America when we're looking at Canada, and that North American campus vibe does come through as well. So this idea of a campus culture of loyalty to your university, the combination of the sports facilities with the social life of the residential communities just come there as well. With a wide variety of geographic experiences in Canada, I think stereotypically a lot of people may think they're going to Canada, it's going to be cold all the time. In fact, when you look at the climates of a lot of the main Canadian cities, they're very comparable to other cities in the United States or indeed in Western Europe. But there is the opportunity to get there and experience the wonderful snow sports and the winter experiences involved with those in the mountains. Amazing geography, particularly if you get out into the mountains and the parks. And if you are going to head north, again, some really wonderful, amazing geographic experiences available. It's typically cheaper than the United States, on average about half the price of studying in the United States. And we also have, compared certainly to the United States, but actually in some cases compared also to the United Kingdom, relatively straightforward application systems. An area that some students overlook is the language opportunities available. Canada is a hugely diverse country with people from all over the world living there. And so students who might be able to be speaking more than one language, maybe they're a student who's studying in English, but they have a second or indeed a third language, may be able to find those communities as well. But also students who want to explore studying in French or pick up French, develop their French, also the opportunity to study in Quebec, the French-speaking province as well. The other reason which isn't included here why many students study in Canada, and this may be something more for parents to be aware of, is that Canada has a very generous immigration regime for students who study at Canadian universities. In shorthand, if you study at a Canadian university, you are on a pathway to become Canadian. And that's done quite deliberately, and particularly in contrast actually to a lot of other countries where the visa lasts for the period of the university studies, and then in many cases it's quite complicated to stay. Canada has an aging population and wants to get talented young people to stay in Canada. So being able to study in Canada and then automatically stay for a period of 3 years once you have graduated, even if you don't have a job lined up immediately, is a really powerful option. And then after that period of study, students can apply for permanent residency and then potentially on to become Canadian. So some really, really good reasons why students might consider studying in Canada. So if they are interested, if you are interested, what are the key features to be aware of? One of the things to point out is it's an absolutely vast country. In terms of the land mass, in terms of the scale of getting from one end of the country to the other, a hugely significant country. If anyone's a geographer and knows about map projections and things, the typical map projections we have of Canada makes it actually look smaller than it really is. But the distances are vast, and with huge variation between the time zones, the climates, the geography, and indeed many, many other factors here. There's a huge amount of interesting things that students can come into. But they also need to understand that when we're talking about higher education in Canada, we have to do this in the context of the politics of Canada. And in Canada, as you can see here, is divided into provinces and territories. And education is not a federal issue, it is an issue for each of these provinces and territories. And so the education process that you're going to find in Quebec is going to be different from that in Ontario and Alberta and British Columbia. The university experience is going to be the same, but how you apply to universities and how they are selecting students will have some nuance within them. And so one of the key things students need to be aware of when they're choosing their universities is going to be which province is it in, and therefore from that province, what potential issues might arise in terms of how I might apply and how I will be selected. Now, there's quite a lot of nuance in there as well that students can come across later in the process, and I'm not going to have the time to delve into each of these individually, but I will touch on some key features as we go along. So I say provincial governments who are controlling the education systems, divided into the 10 provinces and 3 territories. Without a federal Ministry of Education, the provinces are responsible for all levels of the education system. So beyond that, what other key features have we got? Well, actually, a vast sector here, a really, really big sector with many, many students going through it every single year. So the key things we're looking at, we've got a huge number of undergraduate and graduate degree programs. So 15,000 programs to study the undergraduate or graduate level, and 100 public and private not-for-profit universities or the university degree level colleges. And I'll touch on that difference later on. We've got about 1.7 million students studying at Canadian universities. So it's a significant sector bringing people from all around the world. Follows the standard cycle that we see in the UK, US, and Europe: a bachelor's followed by a master's followed by a doctorate. The bachelor degree will typically be a 4-year degree rather than maybe the 3-year degree most common in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And indeed, significant range in terms of tuition fees. These are international tuition fees for someone holding a Canadian passport, or potentially some other ones, which I'll discuss later. Now, the average is going to be towards the top end here for international students, the sort of universities that international students will use. And indeed, this is tuition fees, room and board, and living costs will come on top as well. But we're looking at on an average cost that's going to come in around about half of the average of studying in the United States. And for international students coming into the United Kingdom, paying an international fee, actually potentially going to be quite comparable to that. So the key feature then when choosing a university is to understand that we've actually got a very interesting system here compared to the rest of the world. We've got students actually looking at Canada who are quite often going to be focusing on the universities they know that appear in the world rankings. Now, that's quite complicated in the context of Canada because the international research universities that Canada has will stand up quite highly in that process. But you've got a significant number of Canadian universities that are focusing much more on their responsibilities at the provincial level, or indeed focusing on the undergraduate education. So there is no official ranking system in Canada. And because of how the provinces are running the system, we actually have high quality across the board. So the emphasis really is on the right fit rather than the ranking here. And though universities like McGill, University of Toronto, and University of British Columbia have this kind of global cachet, that really tends to come from the quality of their postgraduate programs and their research rather than the undergraduate experience. Now, those universities are all actually very large universities, and so we do have large research-intensive institutions. But students can sometimes overlook the smaller, primarily undergraduate-focused institutions that might be a better fit for them. So students, when they are looking to choose their universities in Canada, need to be looking at the location, given the difference, given the time zones, given the scale of the sector. The size of the university really is a massive factor. And students potentially looking at someone like University of Toronto, which is a huge institution with 3 different campuses in the metropolitan Toronto area, need to understand this might be significantly bigger than anything they've potentially experienced elsewhere. And then they also need to look at the program, the nuances of that programs and progression within that system. So it's not just as simple as going, I want to go to Canada, here are the 3 universities I've heard of, that they need to delve into greater detail to understand exactly what's out there. Another factor then to understand when we're looking into the Canadian system is that we are talking about a program that may be kind of halfway between the single or joint honours focus in the UK, where you apply to study, say, history or business or French, and the more open-ended approach of the United States, where students are applying to the university and they'll choose their program as they get there later. In the Canadian system, typically you'll apply into a broader program of study. You'll maybe applying into a faculty or a department within a university. And the four most common areas you see are the ones on the screen now. So a student maybe who wants to study something in the humanities, in literature and languages, would apply for a Bachelor of Arts degree. And they would be admitted to that university to pursue the Bachelor of Arts degree. A student wanting to study, say, physics or chemistry, potentially even maths, would go for the Bachelor of Science degree. A student who is looking for business or accounting, finance, would apply to the Bachelor of Commerce programs. Engineering, fairly self-explanatory. And at certain universities, you might have other ways to study. So you might find there's a Bachelor of Nursing, a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and these kind of things. Now, the benefit of this broader approach is that students who may be attracted to the model of not necessarily specifying that one or two subjects they want to study at university, but potentially might be put off by the really broad approach of the US liberal arts and sciences, where you have to study a wide range of subjects, would potentially find this halfway house. So a student who wants to study maybe English literature, but doesn't want to give up on history, on geography and languages, can find in a Bachelor of Arts degree a slightly broader thing, and so on in science and things as well. So it does give students a slightly more flexible model than potentially they've got available in the UK, but not as completely flexible as they were looking into the United States. And then once students have decided that they are looking for a particular area of study, this sort of broader program, the next thing they have to then look at is the subject prerequisites. So because students are not being admitted directly into a subject-specific program, they're going to have a minimum level of eligibility to study that program. So international curriculum, so GCSE and A-level, or indeed the IB, the most common ones in the UK, will be equated to the various Canadian curriculum. So a university in Ontario will have its entry requirements for students studying the Ontario high school curriculum, and then we'll say, well, what is the equivalent of that in GCSEs and A-levels or the IB? And they will then say, in order to study on the Bachelor of Arts program, we need to see these grades. Now, typically for a Bachelor of Arts program, it's just going to say 3 A-levels and probably 3 GCSEs in separate subjects, which most students will meet, and most commonly a B level or C grade level. In the IB, you might see a university say we just need to have an IB diploma that's passed. Slightly potentially more selective universities with Bachelor of Arts might say we just want to maybe see 30 points across the IB diploma. Within things like the Bachelor of Engineering, the Bachelor of Science degrees, you're going to see some more subject-specific prerequisites. So you're commonly going to want to see an evidence of a science subject and some maths within that curriculum. So maybe a science like biology, chemistry, physics, and maths at the higher level, and potentially within the higher level, maybe they're looking at the more theoretical IB course rather than the more applied IB maths course. And they're going to want to see that you have studied this subject and passed it at a minimum level to be eligible. So that is giving the basis by which you have studied this, and therefore legally we think you are admissible to this program. Then we have the third level of this, which is, though, the more competitive the universities, and as I mentioned, McGill, University of British Columbia, University of Toronto, do draw a lot of international applicants, will also say, but once you've passed that eligibility threshold, we also need to see how strong you are within that applicant pool. So you will find on some of those more popular universities' websites that they might say, in order to get into our Bachelor of Engineering degree, our minimum requirements might be AAA at A level, including maths and science. However, in the last cycle, the students who did gain a place typically presented with A star AA. So you can see a range for a lot of courses, it's just about the minimum eligibility, but for more popular programs, more popular universities, you would potentially also see an assessment needed to be made of actually, this is a very popular course and we tend to take students with these slightly higher requirements. I should also point out on the subject prerequisites here, something which catches out a lot of students applying from the UK to Canada, is that Bachelor of Commerce degree isn't a Bachelor of Business degree. And because it's a Bachelor of Commerce degree, it has an element of maths to it. And so students pursuing a Bachelor of Commerce degree in the United States will have to be taking maths within their sixth form curriculum. Typically that in old money would be to AS level. If your school is not offering AS level, then I'm afraid the student is going to need to have maths A level in order to be eligible for a Bachelor of Commerce degree. And that may be a reason why some students who are looking to Canada and want to study business might actually go, actually, it's not going to work for me, because what they thought business was going to be is not going to be as mathematical as it would be within a Bachelor of Commerce program in the Canadian university system. So how do you find out this information? How do you look at these kind of things? I've taken a screenshot here from Queen's, a wonderful university in Ontario, and just screenshotted from the page. You can see down here the program requirements. So I've gone through on their website and said, I'm applying to Queen's, I'm applying to the School of Business for the Commerce degree, and I'm taking the British curriculum, British pattern curriculum, so GCSEs and A levels, and here's their minimum requirements. Mathematics at the advanced level and 2 other A levels. They want English at GCSE or O level A levels, and a minimum maths predicted or final grade of A, and at the GCSE, a minimum English predicted or final grade of A. So that's what they're saying is terms of the minimum things, and then tacked on down the bottom that actually, from the previous cycle, a competitive average to be considered would actually be 2 A's and a B at A level. So the universities will publish these. Sometimes it's slightly clunky to fight your way through the universities and find out, I'm applying to this program, students studying this curriculum, what are the minimum requirements going to be? But at most universities, somewhere you can find these kind of programs as well and start to see whether your student would at least be competitive for that university program. Again, you can see on here, I've taken this from McGill, you get these drop-down menus in here. So you can see in here the country or the curriculum. So I've selected here GCE A levels. What is the program? So you can again see them here, and that's how the program all comes through. The universities that are getting a lot of international applications will have these slightly more easily accessible. Google is your friend here. If you Google McGill A-level requirements, you'll start to find those quite quickly, and so on and so forth for other universities. Then, if your students are trying to find programs in a bit more detail, there's a wonderful website which will enable them to do on here. You can also see some of my lovely Google bookmarks in here. Those you might wonder what I do with my life. So the website is universitystudy.ca. Universitystudy.ca gives you a massive search, and it says here we are, the 15,000 undergraduate and degree programs. And students can search on this keyword search here for the different options on here. 2 key things to work out. The program level for the drop-downs does give you undergraduate and graduate programs, but it also gives you sort of foundation certificate programs, so students need to make sure they select the right option there, and also just select they're studying in English or in French to find those options in there. But it really does show that when you search on this tool, the really wide variety of options that are available for students to do that search to find their options there. I will just chuck in here as well, and the key features thing, a top tip. I think I get boring whenever I give these talks in schools, but really important to share this because students might not have thought about going to Canada as a really cost-effective option. But if you have students who are French passport holders or they're Wallonian, so they're from the French bit of Belgium, they can study in Quebec for the same tuition fees as if they were Canadian. So we're looking at a significantly reduced fee, at around £3,500 for tuition at McGill, Concordia, Bishops, which are the 3 English-speaking universities in Quebec. Or if they're a French speaker and wish to take classes in French, there's also a way of reducing those tuition fees as well. But if you're an advisor at a school and you have French passport holders or French Belgian citizens, it's a really good idea just to maybe go through your management system, drop them an email and say, hey, did you know that you can get a really, really good deal studying at McGill, at Concordia or Bishops? It's going to be a very cost-effective option for them to do so. Particularly maybe in the current political climate, we face a situation where EU students may pay many higher fees to stay in the UK for university after they leave a UK school. Quebec could look like a really, really great option for them from there. Another key feature is the Canadian college system, and something, again, it's not really particularly well known, I think internationally. But in similar ways to maybe in Europe, we have universities of applied sciences offering a more professional style of education. Canada has a Canadian college system that does the same. So these colleges are working very closely with business and industry. A lot of the teachers, the professors at those universities, at those colleges, will be actually maybe part-time and working in industry as well. They offer a wide variety of credentials, some foundation programs, offering some diplomas later on. But they're really interested in one of these transfer programs where students, particularly if they're in a system like in Ontario, they can do their first 2 years at a college and then transfer on to finish their last 2 years of their degree at a partner institution. For students who maybe haven't kind of met their academic potential, within the A-level or the IB system, these are really great pathway programs. Students can study, particularly maybe again within the Ontario colleges system, with very, very straightforward transfer pathways to finish out their degrees in the bigger research universities for the last two programs. The Canadian colleges really are a wonderful opportunity, also for those students who might need a little bit more nurturing, who maybe don't quite have the independence to go out into one of these huge universities, particularly if they may be targeting somewhere big like the University of Toronto. This much more small-scale program where they're going to be monitored a bit more closely and give more time to develop, again, could be a really wonderful option in there. And this is an option I think that not a lot of international students are considering, and potentially could be very sensible for them to do so. So they're working very closely with industry to get these kind of things. Lots of field work, lots of educational integrated learning, practical experience, feedback linking to the industry, and in a very common way that we find in the applied sciences system. So the students who are really interested in looking at the how things work rather than the why things work can find a lot of advantages of studying at Canadian colleges. Within these key features of a Canadian university, we've also got some more nuances that will come into this program as well. And though I've talked about some of the generalities in here, there's a couple of things I just want to highlight that can make it slightly more complicated for students who are looking for a particular thing. The liberal arts and sciences model we associate with the United States also exists in Canada. Nothing like on the same scale, but there are some liberal arts colleges. And a really well-known example, which I've mentioned a few times already, is Bishops. Bishops, founded by the Episcopalian Church, the Church of England, is a small residential community about 2 hours to the east of Montreal in Quebec, offering a liberal arts and sciences education. There are other options of these as well, and they've actually come together and formed something called the Maple League, trying to obviously leverage on the Ivy League. And the Maple League has a website where you can find about liberal arts colleges. So students who actually are looking for a broad study program and for whatever reason would rather go to Canada than the United States can look at that. We've also got these branch campuses. So University of British Columbia has its main campus in Vancouver, but also out in Okanagan, they have their branch campus. And you'll find, as I mentioned, University of Toronto has 3 campuses as well. It has the main campus, but it also has 2 smaller ones, Mississauga being one of them. And so students who might be able to find that they would like to go to this university that they've got the global reputation, but either don't have the entry requirements for it, could look to study at a branch campus, or potentially also they might find that some particular programs aren't offered on the main campus and can go as well. We have some interesting dual degrees. And Western, a wonderful university in Ontario, has the Honours Business Programme here, which has enabled you to combine the business programme with some other options as well. So one of their famous dual degrees is combining the Honours Business Programme with an engineering degree. So students can qualify with a degree in engineering and also a degree in business. And some quite niche programs found in the Canadian university system where you can combine those dual degrees. And indeed, there are some multi-country options as well. So Victoria, the University of Victoria, way out on the west coast, also has some partnership programs for dual study with universities in Europe. So you can do those kind of programs as well. And then a fourth nuance, and a really interesting nuance here, which you don't really find in any other university system in the world, at least that I've come across yet, is that we have standalone colleges which have become part of other universities. So Huron is a really interesting example, but there are many other versions of this dotted across Canada. Whereas Huron was for many years a standalone educational institution. And then over time, as things have developed, it's become subsumed into a bigger university. But it still retains its own admissions process, its own residential community, its own campus, and Huron's is sort of detached across the road from the main campus of Western, its own leadership, its own feeling and vibe of what's going on there. And so students who, again, are looking for something particular niche or difference could potentially apply into this smaller, legally independent college, but which is also accessing the wider resources of the bigger university that it's become a partner with or a part of. These things can get very complicated. And again, as I mentioned earlier, province by province, there might be differences between how these kind of work. But you have a student who might be looking for something particular, something slightly different. It's worth knowing that, yes, we have these big universities and these name brand colleges across Canada, but there are a lot of niches in there that can be found for students that really might fit that student who, for whatever reason, would like a North American experience, but not the USA. With a bit of research and a bit of digging, you can find more of these options that are available. So those were the key features of the process, of the things that are out there, of important things to be aware of as students applying, as parents of students applying, or as advisors. The second half of this is how to apply. Again, as I mentioned, we're talking about things that are being either specific to the region, the province, or the territory, or potentially specific to the university. And this is where a student can actually get quite confused, particularly if they're used to the fact that they might be dealing with one system, so they're applying to the Netherlands and they've got an idea the study link is going to be important, they're aware of UCAS or the CAO in Ireland or the Common App. You're going to find things quite different when you're looking at Canada. And just three most popular examples on here. If you're applying to any university in Quebec, you're applying directly to that university. If you're applying to any university in Ontario, though Toronto does have an exception in there, but typically speaking, any university in Ontario, you can apply through the OUAC, which is the Ontario system in there. If you're applying to British Columbia, you can apply direct to the University of British Columbia. But if you're maybe doing a couple of British Columbian applications, there's Apply BC as well. These are the three most popular, but there'll be differences as you go all the way through. Now, each of these application systems are going to have different requirements in terms of paperwork, deadlines, submission. They're going to have different web logins, different portals, different passwords, different ways in which you register. And this is where the complexity of applying to university in Canada comes in, because students are going to have to learn a number of different systems and manage them kind of concurrently if they're applying across the Canadian system. Students really need to be very organised. They need to keep a quite close log of these kind of things. And the key thing I would suggest if you are an advisor on the call and you've got students doing this is to get them to start a document, potentially maybe a shared document on the OneDrive or on Google Drive, where they can keep all these things kind of linked together, and you and their parents maybe have access to this as well. But across these things, what are you going to be applying to? Well, students are going to be doing a number of different things. Typically, they'll give an overview of their educational background. So where have you been to school? What have you studied? What grades have you achieved? What exams are you going to be taking by the time you finish school? They're going to give some biographical information, nothing like as involved as the US process, similar to a UCAS. Your name, your date of birth, your passports, where you live, and mailing address, and those kind of things as well. They're going to make their selections. If that's just applying directly to a university, then they'll select the course or courses they're applying to at that university. If they're going through one of these systems like Apply BC or OUAC, then they'll select the universities and the courses and those kind of things as well. So commonly what we're looking for here is it's going to be like a UCAS thing, but without the statement, and indeed, from the advisor's point of view, without a reference being submitted. You'll see from the slide I had earlier with the screenshot from Queen's University, you can find some references if we needed. So Queen's has a reference, British Columbia will have a bit of, sorry, Queen's has a statement, British Columbia has a statement as well. But on the whole, students will probably not at the time of application be writing application essays to Canadian universities. Then when students have applied, it can get a little bit more complicated. They can sometimes, through that relatively straightforward application procedure, and a student sitting down with their computer can do an Ontario application maybe in an hour, a McGill application potentially in an hour. It's not very complicated. But after applying, they may find that there are more things to do. And students, particularly if they're not very good at checking their emails or keeping an eye on their spam filters, can actually find that they might miss some things. After applying, the student, will be given a login to applicant portals. And those applicant portals will be different for each university. So if a student's gone through the OUAC, the Ontario system, and applied to 6 universities, they will get 6 emails with 6 different login systems to applicant portals. Now, these applicant portals most commonly will actually be the university student portals. So they're designed for students to register for classes, to get notifications on closures, to bid for accommodations and things. It can be sometimes quite confusing for students who've never had to deal with these things to actually go through and find, well, where's the information that's relevant to me? Students will have to register for things. They might be given logins. There might be their date of birth, their first initial of their first name, and then their surname, all sorts of odd ways these are put together. And only from that portal will students be given information about the status of their application and possibly even have some requests for more information or materials that might be. So it's important that students are logging into these portals. Unlike UCAS Track, and indeed unlike in the US where universities may be emailing them, it's very common that these portals will not notify the students. So students I work with as a private counsellor, I'm making sure that once a week they are logging onto all these portals and checking these kind of things. So the portals are a really fundamental thing to find out what else might be required. From those portals, students may find that they're going to have to send some more materials. They may have upload options, so they can upload passport photo, they can upload, maybe if they do have to do a piece of writing, they can do those kind of things. And some programs will come back to students after application and say, right, we now would like to see a marked piece of schoolwork, we would like you to write an application essay. They might have to have a form downloaded and give it to an advisor at school to send those kind of things as well. Or indeed, they may actually want to have the predicted grades and achieved grades mailed over to the university in Canada. You can also find these portals, you do find some extra requirements coming into. And in the last couple of years, the University of Toronto, for students applying for engineering, has actually had a video interview requirement where students through the portal will be notified that they have to pick a date and a time. At that date and time, they log onto a web link. They're given a couple of minutes to get used to the system. Then they tells them they're ready to go. A question will pop up. They're given a short period of time to prepare and answer the question. The webcam opens, they have to talk their answer to that question for a couple of minutes. The webcam closes and off they go again. And so the applicant really needs to be very aware of all these different systems and requirements because, as I said, they're not going to be notified straight away of these kinds of things. So from the school's point of view, you need to be aware really that you are going to almost certainly have to send something about their achieved and predicted grades. Yeah, a transcript or something like that as well. When I was a counsellor in schools, my rule of thumb was always to have these mailed and actually to prove that they have gone, use FedEx or a similar kind of service to have that kind of stuff going. You've got proof it's gone. Sometimes there are issues in processing offices of getting those kind of things, electronic stuff. If you know it's been sent, you've got the proof it was signed for someone at that university, then you've got some comeback if there's issues later on. And when I was a school counsellor, I would always say to parents, students applying to Canada, we are going to do this and it will be added to your school bill to cover the cost of that kind of stuff. It can also be helpful for the student, parent, and indeed the advisor to have a contact university. You can email with any questions. As ever with international applications to universities, you can sometimes find glitches, things aren't misunderstood. I've certainly seen this year, I've got a couple of students applying to a lot of Canadian universities, including some which I know don't get many applicants from the UK, and they're asking for AS results. That university hasn't realised that most schools in the UK are no longer offering the AS as a qualification point. And so I've been able to liaise with that university on behalf of the students and just say, look, we don't have ASs anymore. You might be dealing with international A levels that do, but our A levels do not, and you need to be aware of it. So a key thing to bear in mind from the school, as well as nagging your students constantly to check their portals regularly, is also to think, you know what, I just need to prepare. I'm going to get all these printed, all the sent off, stamped by the school, maybe signed by someone official. Get them all off in FedEx, DHL, UPS to the university and just make sure once students applied that it's all gone out there, just to absolutely be certain that it's gone. The students have applied, they've gone through, they've got these portals. The offers will come through. Again, the offers will typically be on the portals. So students won't get a lovely email, they won't get a nice graphic coming in, they won't get sort of someone knocking on the door and filming them so universities can stick it all over their YouTube channels. They will just hit on the portal, they've got their offer. And that offer will be conditional, but conditional in a way that is more conditional than typically in the United States, but less conditional than it's going to be in the UK, where students are going to have to meet the prerequisites and the minimum requirements specified in the application. So if the prerequisites that we saw when I was talking about 20 minutes ago are that you have to have studied maths and you have to have 3 Bs, even if you're predicted 3 A stars and you get to those kind of minimum requirements, then you are going to be in because you are meeting the minimum in there. However, if you are predicted 3 Bs and you come out with 2 Bs and a C, and you drop below the minimum requirement, you drop below that prerequisite in those subjects, then you actually no longer eligible for that program. So students do need to be aware when they are considering the programs they're applying for as to potentially where they might fall on that. But typically speaking, the offers will be relatively easy for students to meet and have quite a wide variety of choice will come through. The offers can come quite late in the Canadian system. It's not at all uncommon that you might have students who are holding offers in the United States where they have to apply by May 1st, potentially holding offers in the UK where they need to apply by early May as well, and they haven't heard back from the Canadian universities yet, and that's quite important for them to know. Again, that's where having contacts at Canadian university will be helpful, because if you can say to someone in admissions or recruitment at Canadian university, look, we can do with this decision back in the next couple of weeks, and they can hurry things through a little bit from there. A thing for students to be aware of is that they may also need to have official versions of their exam results sent through. Again, in the A-level system, you typically won't get your certificates until maybe October and November. That's hard if universities need the official ones. So students who do have to have this requirement should register with the exam boards for the early certificates so that they can get those early certificates sent through to universities in good time. I said in sort of 35 to 45 minutes I was going to cover as much as I possibly could on Canadian universities, and so hopefully over the course of the webinar I've given some information. I would suggest some further resources where you can find some more things. I've just finished a little mini-series of my podcast, University Guide, available on my website, universityguide.com, but also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Acast, and all those wonderful places. And 3 series on looking at Canadian universities. This podcast features my good friend Craig Brown, the Director of College Counselling at Shawnigan Lake School. Students can log on and listen to those podcasts, and this gives, again, some more detail on applying to universities in Canada. And if you would like any more information, if you're an advisor, please sign up for my newsletter. If you would like me or my colleagues to come and give talk in schools about these things, we can do. And for students and parents who might want some extra help and potentially are interested in the services of a specialist international university advisor, please do get in touch. My details are there. Thank you very much for joining me for the webinar tonight. Hopefully I've given you some useful information there. For those who've gone through all 3 of the webinars, thank you for putting up with my voice for 3 hours over the course of the last month or so. This will be available on YouTube, so I will email out the recording in the next day or so, and it can be shared as widely as possible. So that concludes the webinar. Please do get in touch if I can help. Thank you very much for joining me.